In the early 2000s, Good Riddance, Time of Your Life, became the unofficial anthem for high school graduates everywhere. However, before American Idiot, Warning, Nimrod, Insomniac, or Dookie, Green Day released an album simply titled Kerplunk on a modest East Bay label called Lookout Records. While it wasn't the group's debut album, it was the first to feature drummer Tré Cool, and as such, it's often regarded as the first to sound more like the group the band has since become known for. Let's pretend it's 1992, and you're handed a CD with a white cover, save for a simple black and white drawing with a touch of green. There's just a picture of a girl who looks like she's, getting into trouble on the cover. It says Green Day at the top and Kerplunk at the bottom, highlighted with a spiky text box in the style of a comic book. Let's also assume you weren't involved in the 924 Gilman punk scene and are unfamiliar with this group's music. You put the CD on and listen to it track by track. Do you think you would enjoy it as much if you were a fan of the band today? Well, I'm curious about that myself. I intend to play the entire album from start to finish, song by song, to determine how well it has aged. I will admit up front that I am a huge fan of Green Day and that I first heard this album around 1995. It's been a while since I've listened to it again, though. But I expect my critique to be somewhat favorable overall. I just finished making a video about how great of a year 1991 was for rock music, but I failed to include this album. Perhaps you can't blame me completely for that, because this was definitely a much smaller album at the time. On this album, Green Day's now familiar lineup of Billy Joe Armstrong on vocals and guitar, Mike Dirnt on bass, and Tré Cool on drums first made its appearance. The album was released on Lookout Records on December 17, 1991. Al Sobrante, the band's drummer before Tré, occupied the throne before he left to attend university. Although 1,039 Hours was officially released by Green Day before Kerplunk, in many ways Kerplunk can be seen as the debut recording by the real Green Day, the lineup that has become so beloved by fans. I certainly don't mean any disrespect to the legendary John Kiffmeyer. Tré is just a force to be reckoned with. Man, drummers never get as much credit as they deserve, do they? Even though they were relatively unknown, I think it's impressive that they were able to sell 10,000 copies on the first day. Even before anyone dared call them sellouts, they had amassed a sizable fan base in the East Bay punk scene. The album was well received by the Gilman Street crowd, and it quickly became the label's bestseller and one of the best-selling albums in the history of the independent label. In the end, it was this album that paved the way for the band's subsequent 1994 effort, Dookie, to achieve widespread acclaim. Currently, it has sold over 4 million copies around the world. The song 2,000 Light Years Away serves as the album's opener. It's got that upbeat, punk rock energy, and it starts with a cymbal crashing. The lyrics talk about how frustrating it is to love someone but not be able to be with them. The song was inspired by his long-distance romance with his future wife, Adrienne Nesser. One for the Razorbacks is the second song. It, too, is pop-punk goodness with an upbeat tempo. I especially enjoy the use of palm muting at the end of the verses. It also includes a brief rock and roll-style guitar solo that is reminiscent of Billy Joe's later work with the band. The song's protagonist tells the female protagonist that despite her heartbreak and difficulties, she should give him a chance. The lyrics are good because the main character isn't creepy and admits he's not perfection, but he's also not self-loathing. He just wants to prove to them both that he can be the right guy if he's given the chance. As the album's third track, Welcome to Paradise was originally recorded here before being re-recorded and released as a hit from their album Dookie. This is where you realize the major differences in production value on the record if it hadn't hit you already. However, I really enjoy the record's audio quality. I can almost picture myself in the crowd at one of the intimate shows they were playing around the time this album came out. As someone who grew up about an hour east of Oakland and the East Bay, why don't we just rename the Sacramento area the Easter Bay? I can attest to the quality of the lyrics in Welcome to Paradise. I have an incredibly precise mental image of the following lyrics. Pay attention to the cracked streets and the broken homes. Some call it slums, some call it nice. I want to take you through a wasteland I like to call my home. Assuming the band members were around 19 when this was released, they likely felt a mixture of excitement and fear at the prospect of moving out of their parents' home and into their own. Yeah, I can say that happened to me, too. Due to the striking similarity between the lyrics and my own life, this song holds a special meaning for me. It's one of their better songs, but I've heard it so many times that I can't say it's my favorite. That said, the recording they did for Dookie is substantially superior. It's easy to hear that the vocal performance isn't quite as good as it is on Dookie. The band didn't make too many changes to the music when they re-recorded it, so it's interesting to hear how similarly it is to the Dookie version. The song Christie Road comes in at number 4. The song opens with chugging palm-muted chords and sad vocals. That's about all the information I need to know that this is the kind of song I like. Great vocal harmonies open the chorus, and Billy Joe's soaring Christie Road at the end seals the deal. Like many of the band's other great songs, this one serves as a good anthem for the boredom of adolescence. The song's ending is ushered in by a solid breakdown that leads into a bridge that provides a welcome change of pace. The fifth song, Private Ale, seems to continue right where Christie Road left off, except that the narrator has gone from feeling a little down to finally getting a jolt of that teenage energy and is now ready to hit the streets. However, he has shifted his focus away from his boredom and is once again considering girls and his long-term goals. It's a lot of fun, and it's one of my favorite songs on the album. Parts of it have a vibe reminiscent of the Ramones, which is a pleasant surprise. Dominated Love Slave is track 6, and it's a weird little song. The band is just being goofy here, with drummer Trey Cool taking the lead on a fake country song that certainly shouldn't be played in front of the folks or the little ones. What this does show, though, is the extent to which Trey's influence on the band extended beyond his role as a drummer. This song is a total skip for me, though. I'm afraid I just don't care for it very much. The 7th track is One of My Lies. Quite an existential song. I can also relate to the feeling of realizing that the world is much, much bigger than just the place you were born into. It's a bit hard to fathom at first, I think. It's a mid-tempo pop-punk song, also on the melancholy side musically, that asks a lot of questions about one's place in the world. The album's 8th track, 80, is appropriately titled. The song's opening is driven by a prominent bass line. Mike has always been an excellent bass player, and his playing is a major factor in the band's distinctive sound. I'm beginning to see a pattern here, a lot of melancholy and angst-filled adolescent musings throughout the album. But that's pretty much what we signed up for, isn't it, pop-punk fans? Not only is this a fantastic tune, but its lyrics are among the album's finest as well. 80 is a short form of Adrian, the woman he met in 1990 and eventually married in 1994. It's about how much he let loose around her and how much he enjoys the mayhem of intense love. Billy Joe even has the number 80s tattooed on his abdomen. He also made a tweet about the song on February 12, 2011, and someone pointed out that it was, in fact, his 80th tweet. But this is not something I can confirm or deny. Android comes in at number 9 on the album. To my ears, this tune fits the bill for a previously unreleased cut from Dookie. It sounds a lot like Chump off of that album, with its palm-muted verse and rapid-fire chord changes. It makes me think of Chump and, even more so, Eminius Sleepus, both from the Dookie album. Just give these songs a listen back to back and you'll understand what I'm talking about. The lyrics tell another relatable story about a young person who wonders what old age will be like and finds the prospect frightening because they have so many other things to worry about in their lives right now. It's a great tune, and the lyrics will always be relevant because they deal primarily with the passage of time. The album's 10th track, No One Knows, features a bass line that's even more melancholy than the one we got in 80, and it may very well be the album's saddest song. There are a lot of beautiful harmonies, and Billy Joe's guitar work, especially his palm muting and the arpeggiated riff he plays, is top-notch. There is some room for interpretation in the song's lyrics. They sound, however, like the ramblings of a teenager who is feeling adrift and confused as he watches his peers move on with their lives. You probably guessed that Who Wrote Holden Caulfield, the 11th track, was inspired by The Catcher in the Rye. Billy was also assigned this book in high school, just like I was. But I loved it from the first page, while he hated it because he didn't want to be forced to read anything. After a while, he looked back at the book and realized that he had been wrong about it. During live performances, he has said that this is his favorite track from Kerplunk. To be honest, I disagree with him, but the song isn't terrible. The 12th and final song on the album is titled Words I Might Have Ate. However, there are 4 additional tracks included as bonus material, and we'll get into those as well. Despite the song's gloomy subject matter, it has an upbeat quality. The album's catchiest and most memorable melody is featured, along with acoustic guitars, claps, and vocal harmonies. If I were a record company executive, I would have definitely put this track out there as the first single. It's a great song that foreshadows the band's future as the pop-punk icons they eventually became. This is one of my favorite tracks on the album, and it serves as a fitting closer. Now, a quick word about the Sweet Children EP that was included as an extra bonus on the album's CD and cassette releases. The band formerly went by the name Sweet Children, and their song of the same name is said to be about growing up and losing one's innocence. The Best Thing in Town features a riff reminiscent of the Misfits' Night of the Living Dead and is all about spending time with your girl and not caring what you do as long as you're together. It's an upbeat and enjoyable pop-punk tune. And then there's Strangeland. This is the 3rd song in a row that shares a general rhythm and atmosphere. I think the song could use a little polishing. It's not bad though. The album wraps up with a cover of My Generation by The Who. The most notable part to me is the part where you hear broken glass and someone yells something out about something indistinguishable. It's fun. It's a good fit for the band, and I don't blame them for covering it, and it's always cool to see a band bring a song to a different genre and still see it work so well. Well, that's it for Kerplunk. In my opinion, the album was largely a confessional look into Billy's life as a teenager. The significance of coming of age, falling in love, and attempting to make sense of it all. The tone is melancholy overall, with lighter moments of elation or anger interspersed, a few moments that are just plain silly. In a nutshell, that's what it's like to be a teenager. So in that regard, it makes for a very relatable album, and one that, even though it isn't the best Green Day album, is still worth listening to if you've ever been a fan of the band's other music.